Sometimes we have to ditch our home country to live our best lives. And I know my version of my best life is different from yours. Outside of living their best lives, there are likely some common things that spur people to move abroad. Let me be clear that I currently live in the US, so when I say moving abroad, I mean moving abroad from the US. That's what we're going to talk about today on the Age Has No Limit podcast. When your best life means moving abroad. We'll talk about the reasons people move. We'll shine a light on those who've been successful at it and even share a few decluttering tips if you're ready to make the move. My name is Patrice Davis, the host of the Age Has No Limit podcast. I'll be right back. It's the Age Has No Limit podcast. We're here to show and prove that your age shouldn't prevent you from designing and living the life you want. I'm your host, Patrice Davis. Let's get started. Welcome back to the podcast. Before we get started, please subscribe so you can catch each episode on your favorite streaming service or watch it on YouTube. And if any of you like what I'm sharing today, maybe it resonates with you, drop a comment and share your thoughts of moving abroad. Maybe you're ready to make the move. You've been thinking about it. Maybe you have fears that you want to overcome. Please drop a comment. I do read them and I'll respond as soon as I can. Now let's dive into this week's episode. At the top of the list why people leave the U.S. are the following: the general cost of living, reducing one's cost of living because maybe they're on a fixed income, the cost of healthcare, reducing, basically the lack of affordable healthcare, the absence of universal healthcare. Healthcare is in there 3 times. Concerns about violence, and that's gun violence, mass shootings, racial violence, and of course the awful political divisions between the so-called red and blue states. There's food quality concerns, and of course racism. Some people are waking up to the reality that they can reduce their exposure to some of these things by just moving abroad. There are others who believe the American dream is declining, and as a result, they are leaving the country. Some, only 36% based on a recent survey, still believe that if you work hard, you'll get ahead, and they believe that still holds true. And I'm one of those people that also believe it holds true to a certain extent, but how hard do you have to work? What are the things that you have to give up as you're working hard? What are the things that are neglected because you're working so hard? And is it worth it? So even though you may still be able to work, get ahead through hard work, what are you losing in the process? Now, others no longer believe in the American dream. Some people believe that the American dream actually exists abroad in whatever country they choose to settle. Interestingly, a recent Axios article featured J.P. Stonestreet and Amelia Basista. I'm familiar with this couple. There are 2 American expats who've lived in Ecuador since 2017 and actually run a business helping people live abroad and earn online income. And according to JP, and he didn't hold back, they've seen a large increase in the number of people who are thinking about or preparing to move because they can no longer live in the US and are looking for a better quality of life at a lower cost. He went on to say that they, of course, are reversing, aging in reverse after they left what they call the toxic hamster wheel that is the United States. And many people are doing it. According to International Citizens Insurance, Mexico actually is the top destination for Americans who move abroad, and that's for every age group. I think it's important to realize that some of us have a vision of Mexico, of, Mexicans coming to the United States and doing all of these negative things. I highly recommend that if you really want to see a different point of view and learn about this wonderful, beautiful country that is Mexico, please look into some other television shows or YouTube content or, newspapers, magazine articles, just to learn more about what the country has to offer. Americans have been moving to Mexico for probably decades, especially retiring Americans, because they knew that they would be able to, have their dollars stretch even further. So it's not a surprise for me. I've actually visited Mexico only once, and I plan on returning several times to see some of these really fantastic cities and towns. I've actually also lived vicariously through the lives of many a YouTuber as they sashayed through Oaxaca and San Miguel de Allende and Merida, Mexico City, what I think is called Guanajuato, and other destinations in the country. So, I'm not surprised that Mexico is at the top of the list. I remember being inspired by a woman named Reverend Dr. Angela B. Martin, who documented her move from the state of Maryland to Mexico. And that stood out for me because I used to live in Maryland. And of course, I was becoming more and more familiar with, so many parts of the country, just the very diverse landscapes of the country. So I remember just really trying to understand more about what the country had to offer. I think more of it had to do with reversing some of the stereotypes and the bad news coverage that I'd been accustomed to about Mexico and this country. So I was, really absorbing a lot of content because I really wanted to see both sides of the coin, see all, the great things that some people were featuring, but also be very realistic, as we all should, about, the other side of every country, including the United States. There are also articles pointing out that San Miguel de Allende is now a hotspot for African American entrepreneurs moving abroad. As a matter of fact, there's Casa Elm in San Miguel de Allende, and it's a luxury guest house and retreat location that was started by an entrepreneur, an American woman, a Black American woman, African American woman named Michelle Wedderburn. She's originally from Florida, started Casa Elm in San Miguel de Allende. And she actually also has, different courses and programs for people who want to actually, accelerate their move. So one of the things I've really, really enjoyed as an entrepreneur and seeing other people become entrepreneurs as they do this is they go through an experience. And because they've actually learned through experience, they're able to take that experience, package it into a course or some kind of program, and then of course offer it to others who want to be able to tap into that firsthand knowledge and accelerate, in the case of Michelle Wedderburn, accelerate their move to San Miguel de Allende, or in the case of my experience launching and growing and scaling a consulting business, they want to accelerate the pace at which they are able to grow their consulting business. There's also the Yarbroughs, and this is a husband and wife duo that again is very, very. They have quite a few YouTube videos where they've traveled, it seems, throughout Central America and throughout South America. They ended up purchasing a beautiful home there after traveling again throughout the Americas. But, why are they moving there? Not just the Yarbroughs, but people in general. Why are they moving to Mexico? Some of the reasons I listed previously that they may be leaving behind. But what they're running toward is, the strength of the US dollar against the Mexican peso. That's one reason. Number two, the relatively quick airline flight back to the US. And of course, number three, which is probably the most important for many of them, and that's the better quality of life that they can actually have in many of the areas of Mexico that they're moving to. But as I said before, Mexico's long been a destination for Americans looking to retire more comfortably. Now, if you add to the list of other Central American countries that have been seeing an uptick of American expats, there's Costa Rica, which actually has gone down the list a little bit, but 2 or 3 years ago, maybe even as many as 5 years ago, 5 to 7 years ago, many Americans were moving to Costa Rica and documenting it on House Hunters International. I remember I used to watch that show quite a bit Sunday nights when I used to braid my daughter's hair to get them ready for school. I'd sit and watch multiple episodes on a Sunday evening. And Costa Rica was one of those countries that was featured, multiple times. Another Central American country seen an uptick of American expats is Panama, and another is Belize. So what are some of the other top destinations for Americans who move abroad? The top countries, according to a September 2022 article that cited data from international citizens, are Mexico, as I mentioned before, Portugal, the Philippines, Italy, Thailand, which is always at the top of the list, Spain, Canada, France, Costa Rica, and the United Kingdom. Now, let me clarify that there are many reasons people move abroad that are not related to their ability to live their best lives. Some leave because of career obligations or family obligations. Maybe they want to experience living in a different culture for a brief amount of time or an extended amount of time. But by far, the reasons cited are better work-life balance and a better quality of life than what they believe they can actually attain here in the United States. Going back to living your best life, according to Bola Sokunbi, the founder of Clever Girl Finance, living your best life can be defined as living a life that makes you happy and also one that allows you to be at your full potential. It's about being intentional with the way you choose to live and living life on your own terms. I was so happy when I saw that last part about living life on your own terms. You all have probably heard me. If you've listened to some of the other episodes, you've heard me mention that many times because that's extremely important to me. But I just wanted, I thought it made a lot of sense that, of course, living your best life means, of course, living your life on your own terms. I believe that's common sense. But wanted to know a little bit more about where people are moving to live, quote unquote, happier lives. And according to a November 2023 article by CNBC, Malaga, Spain, which is, I believe, I won't even try to remember exactly where Malaga, Spain is. Basically, it's now a top destination for expats who are happiest with their social, financial, and work lives. The result is, according to survey responses from over 12,000 individuals living in 172 countries or territories. And I believe that area in Spain must have risen to the top. And the result doesn't just reflect Americans moving to Malaga, of course. This, I'm sure, the survey responses, I'm sure, were across multiple countries. But Spain is considered one of the, quote, healthiest countries in the world. It has one of the highest life expectancies in the European Union, with the average Spaniard expected to live 82.4 years versus the average 80.6 years among all EU residents. So I also had an opportunity to visit Barcelona, which actually was number 13 on that list in 2022. It was just for 8 days, but I can certainly see and feel the difference between our rushed lives here in the US and, life in Spain. Again, I was only there for 8 days. But once you land in a country, it doesn't take a lot of time to really sense the pace at which people live their lives. The things that they may value, some of the things that they may value. I remember waking up and going to this wonderful cafe every morning. I don't recall the name. But actually I wrote about this experience on the ReadySetGoConsult.com website. If you check out the blogs, I do remember writing about my work from anywhere experience in Barcelona. And at that time, I actually remember the name of that coffee shop. But I do remember just going there in the mornings, watching people of different ages coming in, having a leisurely cup of coffee, and then walking back to work. Again, a leisurely cup of coffee, which is very different from the way that we do it here, where, at least for me, before I brewed my own cup of coffee and went through my morning routine of grinding my beans and brewing my coffee and using my specific plant milk that I typically use, I would rush off to work, of course, sit in traffic, finally make it out of traffic, get into the parking lot, fight to get to the parking lot, and then rush to the nearest coffee shop to chug down a cup of coffee. Now, so again, these are just different experiences, different cultures. But, after years and years and years and years of living at that pace, it starts to wear you down. And I think that's what's happening with a lot of Americans. It's starting to wear them down, and they are realizing that they don't have to continue that life experience. They can change their life and experience by actually moving to a different destination. By the way, 2 years ago, Taiwan actually topped the list, with Mexico at number 2. It's always at the top, and Costa Rica at number 3, as I mentioned before. Now, the others were Malaysia, Portugal, and New Zealand, which were number 4, 5, and 6, respectively. I also found it interesting. There was a March 2023 BuzzFeed article about Americans sharing their thoughts about moving abroad. A few of them were pretty funny, and so I thought I would share them with you all. And so there's this couple that moved to South Korea and was amazed at the national healthcare system. The wife actually wrote that she can walk into any doctor, dentist, or hospital and be seen in minutes for a few dollars. There's no more wondering if something will be covered, if I need a referral, and if prescriptions, what the cost will be for the prescriptions, because they're only $2 or $3. Right. And there are a number of people that have, documented their experiences, maybe visiting staying at a hospital in Portugal, or going to a hospital or urgent care facility in Mexico. I actually watched about 2 months ago, a really fantastic mini documentary about the number of Americans who are actually going to Mexico. They're going over the border to see a dentist, because it costs so much more to see a dentist in the United States. They're going over the border in Mexico from the U.S. to see, an optometrist, because it costs a lot less in Mexico. So there's this whole market of, I guess, I won't call it medical tourism. I'm not sure if that's the proper term to use, of Americans leaving the United States, taking a day trip to Mexico, going to get teeth done. One woman was from Hawaii. She'd been saving for years for major dental work that she needed to have. Another person, this man that they featured, needed to have dental work done. He hadn't smiled in years. He'd been saving up his money, and they actually showed him getting whatever work he needed to have done, and of course featured him actually smiling at the end of that mini documentary. So just wanted to provide some, a little bit more insight into what the healthcare situation looks like for many Americans. Not all, but for many Americans who have to save for years to be able to get the dental care that they need. So another person in Berlin wrote that I'm still trying to get used to 5 weeks of vacation. All vacation is paid, and it's standard everywhere. And she mentioned that she gets a 2-hour lunch, and she has a 32-hour work week. Right now, she also commented that with that kind of time, you have much more time to devote to family, to devote to enjoying the outdoors, or whatever it is that makes one happy or content. So I just wanted to make sure that I featured a few of these stories. I also want to clarify that I'm not sharing this information because I think these countries don't have their fair share of issues. All countries do. But I just wanted to feature some of the reasons why, Americans are leaving and moving to other countries, because they believe that they can have a better quality of life. If you go check out that BuzzFeed article, you'll see there were probably about 10 more examples. And of course, didn't want to list all 10 here, but please go ahead and check out that article. Also, if you're enjoying this content, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast. And of course, drop a comment if you happen to be watching this on YouTube, letting me know if any of this resonates, if this is inspiring you to consider a move abroad because you've had this nagging feeling that you want something to change, even if it's just a sabbatical, it's just something to consider. Maybe changing your environment. It doesn't even have to be leaving the US. Maybe, relocating briefly to another part of the country if you have the flexibility to do so. Now, here are a few things to consider before moving abroad. Actually, this isn't a few things. These are about 22 things. But I wanted to provide you with what I believe is a pretty comprehensive list. It's not everything, but a pretty comprehensive list. And I pulled it from two different sources because I thought it would be more beneficial to, provide something that was as detailed as possible. So according to International Citizens Group, here are the things that you should have on your move abroad checklist. And the first thing is, of course, to find out the visa requirements of the new country. That, goes without saying. And then you want to, figure out how will you earn money if you're not retired. And one of the things that I hear quite a bit from people who've successfully moved abroad is do not go to another country expecting to find a job, because it's going to be much, much, much more difficult. And one of the things that they point out is that just like with America in many instances, not all, jobs are typically, the preference will be to employ a native of the country, not necessarily hand the job over to a person who is a recent immigrant. And that shouldn't be a surprise because that happens here in the U.S. as well. Except in those industries where they are targeting immigrants because of the skill set, the expertise, and professionalism that they bring, such as the nursing industry here in the U.S. It's well documented that the United States goes to countries in the Caribbean, certain African countries, and certain Southeast Asian countries to recruit nurses. And they're doing this also with teachers in some instances. And then, of course, there's the IT industry that for many, many years intentionally recruited people from India or from China and Korea and some, of course, Middle Eastern countries. So just want to make sure that, I understand that there are going to be some exceptions by industry. So that was number two. If you, have if you have expertise and want to be able to offer your expertise to companies, you can certainly become a business consultant or some other kind of consultant, or launch an online service-based business, something that AI can't do yet, right? And number three is check the customs policy of your new home country. Number four, purchase your one-way international ticket. I know it must be kind of interesting thinking about purchasing a one-way international ticket. Contact the shipping company for rates and a timeline, what you should expect for your items to arrive in the other country if you decide to ship some of them. And of course, you want to pack and ship the items you can't carry. Sell, and that was number 6. Number 7 is to sell, recycle, or donate everything else. All right. Number 8 is to make copies of important documents. And number 9 is to make arrangements for your first week, your first month, or even your first 3 months in the new country, meaning you make housing arrangements for your first week, first month, or your first 3 months in the new country, depending on what the situation is, what you were able to accomplish before you made the move. You may want to purchase, number 10, purchase medical insurance that will cover medical expenses in the new country. And number 11 is to get the necessary immunizations. Number 12 is to sell or rent your house. Now, one of the things to note is that this list isn't really in a specific order. It's not necessarily, non-sequential, but just wanted to make sure that you all understand it's not necessarily, do this and then do this. It's definitely not sequential. Number 13 is to find a reputable relocation consultant or real estate agent. Number 14 is to sell or ship your vehicle. Number 15 is to set up mail forwarding. Number 16, set up a bank account that you can use overseas. Maybe your current bank account already meets that criteria, and so that's one less thing that you have to do. If you have a pet, you want to definitely check the pet regulations of the new country, and you want to make sure that your pet's caught up on their shots. Make sure you have the medications already filled and ready to go with you, so that when you get to the country, it's just a matter of finding the equivalent in that country. And then you also want and that was number 17. Number 18 is to be able to have some local currency. I'm familiar with people that when they're traveling, they go to their bank and they exchange the funds at their bank, which is a lot less expensive than doing it in the airport of the new country, or doing it at some kind of, exchange service, currency exchange service in that new country. You're definitely going to pay a convenience fee if you try to do it after you leave. Number 19, which I really enjoy, which I really am glad I saw this on the list, is to get language lessons, or maybe sign up for language lessons. I do remember I've heard from a number of people that moved to Portugal, or people that moved to Japan, or even people that moved to China, that it's really, really beneficial to get language lessons so that you can, again, accelerate the pace at which you're able to fully communicate with the local community. And it's just, also out of respect for the culture that you're going to be embedding yourself in. Number 20 is to make sure your cell phone and your cell phone service are set up to operate, just as effectively and efficiently as it did from the US. If it doesn't, you definitely want to look into what the service offerings are in your new country. And number 21 is to research tax laws. Extremely important. When you leave the US, it is my understanding, I'm not a tax expert and I haven't experienced this yet, you will have to pay taxes in your new country and of course in the United States. There are, tax experts that specialize in services for expats. So this is something you definitely want to be aware of now. And number 22 is to find a community of like-minded people. And I highly recommend that. I've mentioned that before, that when you are, making a move such as, moving abroad, there are going to be naysayers. There are going to be family members who, because they're concerned about you, or other loved ones who may bring up or present, the reasons why you shouldn't make the move. They are mostly asking out of care and concern. Some are asking because they themselves are afraid. They live their lives in a box. And they may be short-sighted. They may be risk-averse. And as a result, when you explain that, hey, I'm going to move abroad, that is just so different than the way that they think, that they immediately go to the whatabouts. They immediately, bring up things that you should be worried, that they think you should be worried about. Again, just know that in most instances, they're coming from a place of love and care for you. In other instances, they are basically projecting their fear and their perhaps limited approach to life on you. So now we're going to talk about a few decluttering tips. I am not a decluttering expert by far. However, I've always been one of those people that was very organized. My living environment is typically very organized. My books are stacked just so. My items are stacked on my, counter in my kitchen just so. Very, very neat. So I think that being that kind of person helped when it was time for me to start decluttering. And by the way, I'm decluttering. I'm now an empty nester, so I just thought it would be best to go ahead and start decluttering. But I'm going to go ahead and share my decluttering tips. It's a down and dirty approach, and so I'll go ahead and share that with you now. So one of the things to remember is that I didn't try to sell anything except the few things that I wanted to consign. I also knew that some of my furniture would go with me to wherever I decide to relocate to or to move abroad. So I just want to make sure that you're aware of that. And part of the reason is because I kept convincing myself for several weeks that I would actually host a yard sale. This is of course in between running my business and some of my other personal obligations. Finally, I realized running like starting having a yard sale was likely not going to happen. So let's go to that list. Number one is I made a list of items I wanted to keep, and then items that I wanted to consign, and items I wanted to recycle, or just things I wanted to throw in the trash, right? And I did that for every room with the exceptions of the bathrooms, of course. But the living room, the dining room, the bedrooms, those were the decisions that I made. What I wanted to keep, what I wanted to consign, what I wanted to recycle, and what I wanted to trash. The second thing I did was I started with the closet. I always feel like starting with the closet is just, it gives me a nice, easy win, right? Even if it's a really full closet that takes 2 to 3 hours or to empty out, it's still one of the easiest wins. And so I start with the closet and I throw out old clothes, right? Just throwing out old clothes, maybe old blankets, maybe old shoes. When I say throw out, the shoes I typically try to take to a local Goodwill. So just want to make sure that you're aware of that. Oh, by the way, the other category of my list: keep, consign, recycle, donate, and the fifth one, of course, is the trash. So I forgot to mention donate. And then I would then work on the easiest room, and it's typically the easiest. I typically start on the closet in the easiest room, because just a few minutes later, maybe a couple of hours later, you've successfully decluttered a room, a closet, and it just gives you a nice win and helps to build momentum, right? So that's part of the reason why I start with the easiest room, and I think that makes sense for all of us, for many of us. So another thing to keep in mind is I typically want to have a large container in each room for the things that I know I definitely want to keep for sentimental reasons. Maybe it's one of my daughter's dresses that she wore to a wedding, a family member's wedding. It's a beautiful silk dress that I have not been able to let go of. I mean, I've kept it in so many closets in our home, but it's just a beautiful, beautiful dress, and I can't let go of it. Things, maybe, the arts and crafts that our children created for us as they were in school. Some of them are really, really sweet, so I definitely wanted to hold on to those, and just a few other things as well. But I continued the same approach for each room. I go from the closets to the drawers to the desks, and then I do the other surfaces. Another thing you'll want to do is find the local recycling venue. So in Atlanta, there is an organization here called Live Thrive, and that's where I've been able to recycle paint, recycle, I believe, old appliances, smaller appliances, recycle old clothes, recycle, I believe, also certain small electronics. And it's just a great place to be able to just pull up and have folks help, unload the things that you want to have recycled responsibly. And then, of course, pull off, right? It's just a great place. So there may be something similar in your city, so I highly recommend you look into that. And then you also want to contact an e-waste recycling company, and they're going to take the things that, a recycling hub or recycling venue may not accept. So it's going to be your old laptops, right? Your old CPUs, old monitors, the square monitors, for those of you who remember those. We had quite a few of those, because my former spouse was great at computers, and he was the one that fixed, the neighbor's computers. And so unfortunately, after they've made a decision to get a new computer, they would stay in our home to live out their lives. But I have been the one that's just been taking them to the e-waste recycling company. I've done that a number of times, and so I just want to make sure that you look into that as well, because you don't want that e-waste in your landfills, and just all of the things that leach out of it, all the very toxic metals that leach out of it. So that goes again for your old phones, your own laptops, your old CPUs, old monitors, things like that. You then also want to contact the consignment store, and you want to, find out Some have a process where they'll have you take pictures, email the pictures, and then they say, yes, we'll take that. No, we won't take that. And the things that they won't take, you then have to decide, okay, do I want to donate this, which is probably the best route to take? Or do I want to, bring it along with me, which is not probably the best route to take because you were considering consigning it for a reason. So I hope I covered, not only the reasons why people leave the U.S., some of the destinations that they go to, some of the things to consider when you are relocating and moving abroad, and certainly the ways to approach decluttering. There's so much more information about how to declutter, but I wanted to come with a list that was genuinely mine based on my experience, which I think was pretty successful. And so that's it for this episode. I did want to make sure that we covered this because I'm becoming more and more aware of people that I know in my, in my sphere, so to speak, who are actually making that move. They are of the opinion that the American dream isn't what it used to be, and they're looking at retirement and thinking ahead about where their money can stretch the farthest, and so they have decided to move. Actually, I'm aware of I would say at least 6 people who have done that. So, and I know I'm not the only person. So there's probably someone in your circle that's also considering it or have already done that. So I wanted to remind you that there are several online communities you can join to learn from people already residing in your new country. There are multiple expat groups and events to prepare you for the move. So don't forget to also not put too much, stress on yourself. Give yourself a lot of lead time. I gave myself enough lead time to declutter my home because, of course, as I said, I run a business and I have other obligations just like all of you. And so just want to remind you to give yourself grace, give yourself space, and to not put too much stress on yourself. So for those of you who are wondering if I am planning to live my best life elsewhere, yes, I am. It's not an immediate plan, but you guys, you better believe that you will. I will share it with you once that move happens. As a matter of fact, I have wanted to move out of the U.S. for about 30 years, not because of the reasons I listed before, but because I am an immigrant, and so I understand what life is like or was like when I was a child growing up in my home country. And of course, I can compare it to my life here. And while I've been able to, become successful in some regards, I've raised my children here. I've always wanted to move back to my childhood country or my childhood home. I'm not necessarily the childhood home, but I've always wanted to move back to my home country. And it's, so this is that's really it. Just wanted to really reintegrate myself into my home country. So of course, I said I will let you all know when it happens. But while I plan my move, I will still try to make sure I travel as much as I can. As I've shared before, I do have a blog on the ReadySetGoConsult.com website. That's ReadySetGoConsult.com, where I share my lessons learned while working from anywhere. So again, you can find it on the Ready, Set, Go Consult website. If you're interested in becoming a freelancer or a consultant, I have a free downloadable ebook and masterclass on that website that will help you do just that. And so just know that there are resources that we provide at no cost to you to help you consider or think through your next move, whether it's to stay here in the U.S. and maybe work as a consultant and attain more time freedom in that way, or if it's because you plan on actually moving abroad like many others have done or are doing. So here's where I leave you with a quote. And this one is about enjoying life while you can. This one is also from Louis Boone, and I thought it just, it was the one that resonated the most. And here's the quote. The saddest summary of a life contains 3 descriptions: could have, might have, and should have. I couldn't agree with that more. And with that, I'll end this episode of the Age Has No Limit podcast, but not before I ask you to subscribe once more to the podcast and share it with your friends and family. Until the next episode, remember, age has no limit.